All right, we're going to quickly go through this, and what I mentioned with yesterday concerning the first beast, there's two beasts that come up one out of the earth and the other out of the sea. And when we understand the first beast that comes up out of the earth, that's referring to the Roman Empire that fragmented into the 10 toes. And the emperor, or when we read there in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it talks about he is taken out of the way. And that's referring to the emperorship, where that transcended from the emperor of Rome into the papacy of Rome. That was in 538 AD. And the papacy now becomes this is when the Antichrist is fully revealed. And the Antichrist is in the seat of the papacy. And he is the political head. He is the little horn in Daniel 7 that comes up out of the 10. So quickly go to Daniel 7, and we're going to finish this today. We have to. It's the last day. But Daniel 7, remember what I said in verse 4? This is according to the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and Daniel gave the interpretation. And prophecy goes from east to west. So we start with the Babylonian Empire. That's found here as the lion in verse 4 of Daniel 7. Then in verse 5, that's the Persian Empire, the Persian and the Medes, that's the bear. Then we have in verse 6, the leopard, that's the Greek Empire, that's Alexander the Great. In verse 7 says, and after this I saw in the night visions, behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, strong and exceedingly. And it had a great iron teeth, and devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet, which is diverse from the all beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now this is referring to the 10 kingdoms. Anytime you read a horn, it's referring to a kingdom or a power. And we have the 10 horns, and then it says, verse 8, and I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom were the 3 first horns that were plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. This is referring to the papacy of Rome. They were 3 countries that were not subordinate to the papacy, and they were eliminated. And I don't recall the name of those countries, but understand when we look at the 10 kingdoms or the 10 horns, these as an example, Germany, France, Spain, England, and so forth. And so in Europe did not include India, did not include China. So we're taking from Constantinople, which is where Europe begins, and we're moving west. And this is how the prophecy works. And then when we get into the nations now overtaking nations, and then Rome is the last, it's this iron beast, and it then has the 10 toes mixed with iron and clay. And this is the little horn that comes up. Horn is kingdom, power. The papacy is the figurehead that when you have the state and the church joined together, this is that political system. And you have the state and the church joined together. The papacy, the divine right of kings, is he grants the kingship, and the kings protect the church, the papacy of Rome. So this is where they're married. And through this now, this is the beast. And it's a political empire mixed with the church of Rome. And this is the beast that rises up out of the earth. And as I mentioned yesterday, in 538 AD is when the Antichrist was revealed. This is the Antichrist now is established as the supreme power. And then, of course, the Catholic institution, it begins to mutate and manifest itself. And then in 1798, the wound that is mentioned in Revelation 13, the wound by a sword. And the sword, when you look in the Word of God, the sword carries a couple of different meanings. Number one, the Word of God. That's the sword of the Spirit. Romans chapter 13. Now we have the political sword, where it says in regard to the powers that be are ordained of God, and he beareth not the sword in vain. And he that lives by the sword will die by the sword. And this was the papacy of Rome that lived by the sword physically as well as judiciously. And so the papacy now suffered a wound by a sword. The political powers that be arrested, this is under the rulership there in France, Napoleon. So his general arrested the papacy of Rome and took his power. So this wound happened. And then there'll be a second beast now that'll rise up out of the earth. And as the prophecy moves east to west, the interesting thing concerning this beast that rises up out of the earth, not the sea, is it's interesting. It had two horns. One is a lamb and the other one is a dragon. And as prophecy moves this direction, we would assume that out of this comes the United States. It is a lamb, a Christian emphasis, as well as the dragon, and how that the United States will become the Achilles heel and the perverseness of government and so forth. Now there's a new beast rising. And so when we get to the other beast, we're trying to figure out who this beast is. But nevertheless, it will be like unto the first. And using manipulative powers and deception. When we read about the first beast, remember, you must have, as we looked in Romans 1, you have imaginations. And the imaginations are these thoughts, conversations. This is what's taught in the universities, this wokeism. So this is an example. You have the imaginations, and then that becomes the image. That becomes what you are. You become the icon. You're an image. And we see this in society, the wokes and all, they look the same, they act the same, and all that have this philosophy. And then you have compliance. This is what happened with Rome, and how that you have, as we mentioned here, concerning this man right here who was part of the Nazi Party, and they tried to identify who he is. Everyone else is saluting. They have been indoctrinated with the imagination and then the image. So Hitler's speeches, the imaginations, and Goebbels with their propaganda campaign and the deception. And so the people now have this sign. And we understand concerning the mark of the beast, you have the image, then you have the mark or the name or the number. And there's three. People think there's just the one, but there's three components. You have one. It's the name, mark, or the number. And we have seen that, but I don't want to go back and rehash all of this. But this man married a Jewish girl, or wanted to, and the Nazi Party said no. She was put in a concentration camp. She died, and he was conscripted into the army. He died in Croatia. He was buried in a mass grave. But notice here, he was not submitting to the icon. His imaginations now were different. His thinking was different, and he was not part of the system. And so I don't want to go into all of that again, but I do want to look here in 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12. And it says here, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. The theme of the meeting this week has been truth. And remember what Jesus said to the Pharisees. He said, ye are of your father the devil, he was a liar, and the lust of your father ye will do. Anytime there's a lie that accentuates, it opens the gate. When we believe a lie, the lust of your father ye will do. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. When we understand that when Jesus said, your father's the devil, and he connected the lie. So when you believe a lie, it actuates the lust. It opens the lust gates of the heart and mind. And so the lie has to be propagated. And this is what we further read, where he said, they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved, or for this cause God send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. And we're living in, as it was in the first beast, society believed the lie. When you read in the Revelation, it talks about the miracles and the signs the Catholics always have, such as the crying painting or the crying statue, and now there's a nun that won't decay. I mean, they have all of these things that deceive people, and they believe a lie to become to the sign. All right? They have, the sign is always the outward, visible association, that you're in compliance. And that's what the purpose of the sign of the cross was, that it's a sign. Who doesn't do it is not in compliance. So we're looking at the second beast is like unto the first. The way our ancestors dealt with the first beast is a key how we need to deal with the second beast. Now, we could be facing, and I believe we'll be facing some challenges of our constitution of our hearts and our faith system. It will be challenged. and we have to decide what we're going to do. But the word strong delusion, it's an energetic and forceful fraud and deception. And so it's based on a lie. And with that, with every lie, what Jesus said, your father, the devil, he was a murderer and he was a liar, and no truth is in him. Therefore, the lust of your father ye will do. So when a lie is propagated, and we're going to see what some of these lies are, and if people believe the lies, they will conform to the image now. So there has to be an image before there's a mark, a name, or a number. You will not force this on society unless you lie to them first. The Hitler salute, it was based on a lie, and you tell a lie long enough, people will believe it. Now, the delusion of gender. So gender is a social construct, non-binary, neither male nor female, unable to define a woman, man can have, and a man can have babies. So this is the social construct as an example that we're seeing. So I'm going to list several things that are happening in society today that is going to create the imagination. This is the conversation. The imagination and their foolish heart was darkened. And so the imagination is the propaganda. It is the lies, the falsehoods that are being shared. And after this, you become the image. And the image, such as, we bear the image of God the Father. We bear His image. And Romans 8:28 and 29, we're conformed to the image of His Son. And this is the mindset. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. And so we must protect the mind. I think normally that people speak around 300 words per minute, and the high-velocity thought stream that we have in our mind, you could live the entire day and go through the sequence of events in the entire day in just moments. But yet, for you to speak, it takes 300 words per minute, so it's a process, but the mind, it can live the whole day. And this is why we have to be careful and guard our heart and mind with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Be careful what we put in. And so we have to be careful of indoctrination that's happening today. And so we want to have the mind of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. But as an example, the delusion of gender. And I believe what we're seeing today, as far as the beast that comes up out of the earth, we say, what would it be? Well, I believe possibly as you have the marriage of church and state, you're going to have corporation marrying the government. And as an example, the possibility, and with that, now the government is able to circumnavigate our rights because they'll say, well, Facebook or Twitter, they're private companies, and they can do what they want. And the government can go around behind and suppress free speech. But in reality, they're a utility. I think if you get above 30,000 individuals that are using something like that, it becomes a utility, such as the phone company or the power company. They're privately owned, but they become a utility. And therefore, certain rules apply that don't apply to as it's a private business. But nevertheless, this is a way I think the government can circumnavigate some of our privileges according to our Constitution. And such as credit card companies can say you're not going to buy bullets, you're not going to buy a pistol, or you're not going to buy a rifle, and they control the credit system, and they can shut that down, restricting our Second Amendment. So you can see how this beast is going to be able to control people and control our lives and what we do, especially when they get into the digital dollar. And I know right now it's not down on the level with individuals, but it would be coming later. But the digital dollar that's coming out, I think this month or next month, and it's all part of that system of the economics and controlling people. And so this is like unto the first beast. And so this image system, but let's look here. As with the first beast, so with the second. As with the first beast, people were forced to believe the unbelievable. Now, this is what we have to understand. They were forced to believe the unbelievable. As an example, the populace were forced to accept the practice of trans. There were trans people before today called transubstantiation. Now, that is a ludicrous thing to believe, but the more ludicrous it is, and if I can get you to believe it, the more I know I'll have you in compliance. So the more radical and more crazy it is, I got you. So if I can get you to believe the stupid stuff, you will go from the imaginations to the image to compliance. And this is what happened with the first beast. And the second is like unto the first. So we have transubstantiation. This is where the bread and the wine of communion actually turned into the literal body and the blood of Christ. Today, we have transgender, where a man can be turned into a woman and a woman into a man. A woman into a man. This is unbelievable. Nonetheless, it is forced upon society. Compliance is required. The moment we as individuals or as a collective church body, we are conforming to the image of the beast. And so we have to be careful about the radicalization of these lies. This is a lie, just as with transubstantiation. They kept pushing it and forcing people to say it. And that's what they want you to do. Say it. That this man is now a woman and we cannot define gender. Say it. And that's what they make us say. And so what they're doing now is compelling speech. They're compelling you to say it. If you don't address a person by their pronouns, you can be considered a terrorist, a threat. And I believe some states are doing that right now. And so if you're in a certain environment, you must say it. So they will compel speech, not just free speech, but compelled speech. And that has never been done in America, but that is coming. So we see that example. Here's another thing. A pastor arrested a second time for protesting children's drag queen story time events. Sick, twisted perversion. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But it's constantly being forced, and this is where the ESG comes in. The World Economic Forum. There's a Charles Schwab and then a Klaus Schwab. They're different. So don't get the two confused. They sound similar, but the other guy, the bald German fellow, that's Carl Schwab. Carlos, or what's his name? Klaus. Yeah, Klaus. So it's not the same as Charles Schwab, a banker in America, but Klaus Schwab, he's the different guy. He's in charge of the World Economic Forum. And so we're seeing a lot of things. This beast that's rising up now out of the earth established nations. And the sea was referring to the first beast that come up out of the sea, which is there, the nations of Europe, the Roman Empire, the masses of people. That's what the sea was. But now the earth, we're seeing this beast rise up out of the earth that includes all the governments. I believe there's like 192 nations or 198 nations that are part of the UN. But we have the G7 and so forth. But you have the World Economic Forum, the ESG, the environmental. That's the environmental part, what you're doing, and we wonder why are these stores really pushing the sodomite agenda, the pride, the gay pride, and all of that? Well, you understand that within a corporation you have stockholders, and now what is the other stock people? Stakeholders. All right, stockholders. If you own stock in something, that company, the fiduciary, they must keep producing money for you. Well, now it's the stakeholders in the ESG, and these are people that tell the companies what they're doing, they're going to do. And so they're forcing this. If they want to borrow money and build and expand, and you have to do what they say. And so this is why these corporations are being forced, and not all the corporations necessarily want to do it, but they're being forced. So just a few people in the corporate body of a large organization, they can run everything, and they can shove this stuff down our throat, and that's what they're doing. And then you have the social ability and dealing with the communist regime, the BLM, and all of this is communism, and they're forcing this. Now, fascism, people call us fascists, and they don't even know what fascism is, and they'll call you that. But if you ever looked at the logo of a fascism, it's a cousin to communism. Now, communism and socialism, communism is the theory, socialism is the enactment of the theory of communism. But fascism is described in two words, blood and soil. And as with Adolf Hitler, the fascism was that it was such as where you have a people that are from that area, such as the Aryans, and they didn't want anybody else part of them, and so this was exclusive, and the Aryan race, and then, of course, dealing with that, and I want to use the word correctly, because nationalism is fine, But when you say nationalism in the context of genetics, that's where it becomes wrong. So this is what fascism is. So when you look at Hitler, fascism, the first time that we have a record of it existing was with Mussolini. And then, of course, Hitler became the fascist. But they'll call us fascist, and they don't even know what fascism is. And then when you look at their logo, it's the wheat bundle tied together with tools. It's where the collective becomes one, and it's in the blood and soil. This is our land, and this is where we're from, and we're the Aryan race, and we don't want nobody here but the Aryans. Now, the United States is different. We're a cultural melting pot. Now, we can say nationalism in that regard where we say our Constitution, the freedoms and so forth, and our nation, and it's made up of pluralitas unum, which is one out of many. And so when we talk about nationalism, that's a good thing in that regard. But not when you put it within the context of genetics. And of course, out of this comes the eugenics, and out of that came Planned Parenthood and euthanasia, and Dr. Mengele, the doctor of death. And so you don't want to always trust the science, because every time I've looked at it, science most of the time has been wrong. And so now we're seeing the compliance issue, and the more ludicrous it is, put a mask on and then put 5 masks on. You need to wear another mask over a mask. And I think Carl Schwab and these fellows are laughing up their sleeve at the idiocy of our compliance. You got all these, it looks, you have all these masks on, and this thing again is just, it's ridiculous. It's crazy, but we're living in times where the more unbelievable it is, the better it is. Yeah. To get you to believe in transubstantiation, that when you drink wine or juice or grape juice, whatever they use, or eat a bread, it actually turns into flesh and blood. And so we believe that oh, great. The more the lie, and this is the strong delusion. The bigger the lie, the bigger the blessing for them, because compliance is coming, and that's what it demonstrates. Now, the second beast is another power, kingdom, or government. Another beast coming up out of the earth, and having 2 horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon, and exerciseth all power of the first beast. That is the same thing the first beast did: compliance, control. And of course, it controlled the churches and what church could exist. And so churches today are an arm of the government. And this is where, when it comes into our churches, and by the way, it'll happen, you'll be compelled, especially by precedent, to marry them, the same-sex marriages, or lose everything. You get yourself in debt, you're part of that system, and then you have the ESG, and that's the governance, and you'll be controlled. So this ESG is a very scary thing, and I believe it ties into the image of the beast. It's the imagination, and then it's the image where I now believe it, and then you're in compliance with it, and then you have the name, then you have the number, and then you have the name, or the number, or the mark. And so remember, the beast is a symbol of power. Today it is found in cancel culture by the civil powers. He had a wound by a sword. This is the meaning: being killed by a civil power, enforcing laws of sodomite marriages and transgender, etc. Now, the delusion of race and diversity and inclusion. So we have white privilege does not exist. And then you have the reparations for slavery. Now, when America was founded, the thing is, it was founded by the British came here, primarily had the colonies. Slavery was not an American thing. It was a British thing, and it was something that we inherited as a nation. And I said this yesterday. I was sharing a true story, what was found. Somebody wrote a blog, and my great-grandfather had his photo of him sitting in a chair. This was in 1902 when he died. He fought in the Civil War, and he was on the Confederate side. But you know that after slavery was over constitutionally in the country, that you had the emancipation, that people think that freed the slaves. What it did, it killed them, because by mandate, if you didn't retaliate against the slave owner and you were forced to leave, they had nowhere to go. There wasn't welfare back then. You didn't have any kind of government assistance back then. And I forget how many thousands died of starvation and disease. And so then during the Reconstruction of the South, that was another mess that happened. But after the Reconstruction of the South, and I think it was in 1888, Benjamin Harrison and Levi Morton, he was the president, Harrison, and it was a tie, and so the South said, we'll let you have it if you'll end the radical Reconstruction. And so they did, and the South began to rebuild. And of course, now at that time, the black folk had really not a lot of places to go, and I know there was now I don't know when this black gentleman showed up at the Woody Homestead, but he showed up there. My grandfather, who fought for the South, took the black man into the home, and he became part of the family, and gave him a place to stay and fed him, and he became part of the family and stayed with the family until they died, or he died. And so there was a love there was a closeness, and that's what this article that my grandson sent me, he found, and I thought, well, that's a blessing to read that. And now slavery was an issue. It's an incident. It's like as Jefferson said, taking a dog by the ears. And so, we shouldn't have, you can't, even I believe the Supreme Court of Alabama said that you cannot own a man, only his labor. And so the elimination of slavery and all, but it's a black mark. I know that, but yet, the Civil War wasn't over slavery. I know people think it was. It wasn't. It was an incident, but it was not over slavery. And but I don't want to get bogged down into that. But dealing with what is mentioned today, white privilege and reparations and all, but this is all part of the delusion and putting down America. That in this country, the unique thing about America, we have a Constitution. And it gives us the ability to overcome our weaknesses and gives the opportunity for everyone. When it says that when we read all men are created equal, and we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights that Jefferson said, it's not that we're equal in height, we're not equal in ability, but equal in opportunity. And that's what the equality is. And so today, doesn't matter what color you are, male or female, you have a great opportunity in front of you to make life what it is. I forget the percentage of the population, I want to say it's like in the 20s of our country is from legal immigrants that come to the country. So they're a small percentage of our population, but yet they are 30% of all businesses. Immigrants that come here, 30% of all businesses in America are owned by legal immigrants. They know the promise of this country. They know the liberty that this country gives and opportunity. So we're listening to all this white privilege and all of that, and delusion of race, diversity, and inclusion, etc. This is all part of a communist thing, and it's a lie. And you can't believe the lie where you're ashamed of your color, ashamed of what God made you, whether you're black, white, red, it doesn't matter. But now we have, well, I'm ashamed I'm white, See, this is a lie. And it's part of the purpose, and it's a lie, and they're shoving lies down our throats, and that men are women and so forth. Now, we deal with the subject of critical race theory, and this is a lie that this is how it develops. Now, this lady right here says the diversity inclusion is a deity consisting diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of folks don't understand what equity is. Now, I've seen the illustration where there's a fence and there's a game. And on this side of the fence, you have a tall person that can see the game. A person next to them are a little lower. They can't see the game. And then the person over here, like a child, can't see anything but the fence. So what it is, diversity, equity, and inclusion is, well, what you do, you bring the tall guy down, and you take his assets and put them over here and lift the other person up. What that is, it's called the redistribution of wealth under a title of diversity and inclusion. See, that's communism, and it's a lie. It's a lie, and so you have the ability to make something of yourself. Don't take from somebody else that's successful because you're lazy and you want to see the game. You can see the game, build a ladder, and you can see it. But cancel culture is what we're looking at. Now, these are the seven things we're dealing with, but cancel culture and social media, you have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here's what you have. in the cancel culture montage. All right, this is a lie. This is part of the second beast, getting you the imaginations to conform to the image, to conform to compliance. So we see an example. We'll see another one here. So here it is. We have, you're a white supremacist. If you're white, you're a white supremacist. If you're a Baptist, you're a white supremacist. You believe in owning slaves. I've never owned slaves, never would. And so race isn't an issue. I think the cultures and people, I think it's amazing. Different cultures, different races, like Pastor Sam there, Pastor Camundo, good friend, never met him, but we communicate all the time. I know Caleb does, and Brother Smith. And he said, and he speaks fluent English, but he also speaks the Swahili, I think it is. He's there in Kenya, and he's a very intelligent man, and he found us. He wants to know about Baptists. He's a pastor over there, and so we tried to get him to the United States, and we love Pastor Sam, and he always sends pictures of his children, his little daughter, and she's always singing, and and he's a farmer, and he's a good fella, and I think it's amazing their culture, the way they are, and different people, and a lot of interesting things. I like the diversity that we have even among races. So the color isn't an issue; it's the culture that can become the issue. The word cult comes from culture. Other words, a cult is derived from the mannerisms, etc. And so you have different cultures. You have the Communist Party culture. Y'all getting hot now? Getting a little warm up here, and I'll shut this thing off. And should preach on hell with that thing on. Amen. But anyway, this is what they teach about the white supremacy, and then voyeurism, and then white privilege, and then white benefit, and then white confessional. That's when you have to confess you're ashamed to be white. Then you're critical of the white race, and then they tell you you're a traitor. Then you get to the white abolitionist. And so this is racial division. This is communism. And so now they begin to get where we tear ourselves down. And so basically, the 8 white identities that, such as voyeurism, wouldn't challenge a white supremacist, desires non-whiteness because it's interesting, it's pleasurable, seeks control and consumption, appropriations and non-whiteness and so forth. And so they have this, and this is what they're teaching. They're trying to get you all the way over. They go from one to you're a supremacist. I'm not a supremacist. I'm just Brother Woody, and I'm not a supremacist. And I love black people. I love Oriental people. I love all people. It doesn't matter. And, they're neither male nor female, bond or free. We can all be one in Christ and set this body together as a local church. So the color isn't a problem. But this right here is a culture that bothers me. That's a culture right there. That's a cult. All right, so this is part of this indoctrination. Here's another one. In March 2023, a Loyola professor claims organized pantries are rooted in racism and sexist social structures. This is real. Oh, you're organized. Well, you're a racist. I'm sorry, let me live in squalor. And but this is racism here. Isn't this stupid? Yes. That's unbelievable. But if I can get you to believe it, say it. That's racism. Say it, you little fuzzy-headed twit. Say it. And get him to say it. I'm ashamed I'm white. I'm ashamed. Yeah, it's all racist, And so let me dye my hair pink and spike it. And so this is racism. And so the most ludicrous thing they come up with, put 5 masks on, you idiot. The more ludicrous it is, the more the beast is going to have control. So you understand, as the first beast was, like with transubstantiation, Mariology, and all of these things, that they brought up all these lies. And God will give them that delusion. You want to believe a lie? Go ahead. That's why we hold to the truth. Not believing a lie. I'm not a racist. I'm not ashamed what color I am. And this is not racism. This is just organization. Yes. That's all it is. Now, from global warming to the global cooling, now climate change and the worship of earth and eliminating man's dominance of the earth and the delusion of environmentalism. This is a great delusion. This is all part of the image. So we talk about the image of the beast or the imagination, then we get to the image, then we get to the name, number, and mark. Or, doesn't mean everyone will have a mark or something tattooed, but there are three options that control society. They'll get you one way or the other. And that's what that ESG is all about. There's something there. Oh, remember her? How dare you? This little girl telling everyone, and all the men capitulated. I guess they felt bad. It said, you need a spank and go back home. But here, how dare you question the science falsely so called? And that's what we have, avoiding profane. So here, Paul is saying, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called. Quit listening to this. Quit listening to it. From cancel culture to crisis culture. Everything's a crisis now. Everything. Code red. The existential threat. Existential threat. A top climate scientist is warning the climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. Do you know that the oil we get out of the ground is not fossil fuels? What is it, Brother Devati?
Made from some kind of microbe, and it's produced with water.
It's a bacteria. It's not antibiotic. It's not antibiotic. It's very similar to the word antibiotic, but it's a bacteria. We don't use fossil fuels. See, that's another lie. This is not dinosaur bones, the oil you put in your vehicle. And the earth still produces the fuel. It still produces oil. It's not fossil. But that's another lie. It's fossil fuel. You know, we're running out. No, the earth keeps producing it. The oil still is produced today. And so let's continue. Here's the crisis. And this has been going on for a long time. We have 1969 to 70, and the New York Times and the Boston Globe published this. We must realize that unless we are extremely lucky, everybody will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. That was in 69. We have air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause new ice age in the first third of the next century. That was in 1970. We have in 1972 and 74, the Brown Science Department to the White House. Deep concern with the future of the world fails within the ranks of process which produced the last ice age. Spy satellite shows new ice age is coming fast. That's in 1974. The Salon, the West Side Highway, which runs along the Hudson River, will be underwater. That was in 1989. And a senior UN environmental official says the entire nation could be wiped out and in the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. Crisis after crisis. Then we have another one, my favorite, Al Gore. The North Pole. What did I say? What did I call him?
It's one word, Al Gore.
Al Gore. Okay. Al Gore. Hey. Al Gore. Okay, the North Pole will be ice-free in the summer by 2013 because of man-made global warming. See, people believe it. If I keep telling you a lie, you know, and that everything on the news is a big lie. It's all lies. The genderism is a lie. Now, I realize that the COVID pandemic, I know people died from that, but but there was a lot of lying with it, with the mask. You know, there's a lot of lying with it, but this is another lie. We have also the Independent, 2000 and 2004. Snow is starting to disappear from our lives. Children just aren't going to know what snow is. 30 days a month ago, we had 30 some odd inches of snow. So we know what snow is. Major European cities will be sunk beneath the rising sea as Britain is plunged into the Siberian climate by 2020. That was in 2004. Another lie. And you want me to believe the science? That you're the same science of Dr. Mengele. You're the same science of the eugenics. You're the same science. And Leading U.S. climate researchers say the world has a 10-year window of opportunity to take decisive action on global warming and avert a catastrophe. In 5 to 10 years, the Arctic will be free of sea in the summer. That was in 2008, still hadn't happened. And this scientist, Neil deGrasse, he said this. Now, he said in 2014, he said that with the snow melting on the polar ice caps, the water will be up to her elbows. Still there? I forget, this is a black and white picture, so that's probably, I forget, I don't recall the date this picture was done. I should have, but it's the same water level right there. And so, and he's a well-known scientist, Neil deGrasse. And, Paul Ehrlich, the population bomb. He's the guy that back in the 70s, he was in the Jurassic period, and they'd still drag this guy out and put him on CNN, the clown news network. And they put him on there, and Paul Ehrlich, the population bomb of the 1970s. Now, since the publication of the population bomb, while global population more than doubled, chronic hunger has been reduced by almost 70%. From 33% of a total population, just over 10%. How Paul Ehrlich continues to get credit for his theories instead of pillarized by these facts is a mystery understood only by progressive environmentalists viewing the world through the green-colored lens. I remember, and I still can't find my notebook, that I had the quotes from his book, that I was preaching this in the 80s, that he talked about we're going to be crowding ourselves into the ocean, and we're going to be running out of food. And he talked about all the demands that a child requires, how much water they consume, and it's like it's overwhelming. And you say, I don't want to have any children, and it was going to cost so much, and how much it cost to raise a child. So he had all the negative lies in his book, but he's proved wrong that there's more people now and there's more food now. Well, there was until this lie, and all of these beef plants blowing up and burning down, and all the, the dam that over there in Ukraine that was blown up. All right, that? They're saying who did it? Well, the concern is not who did it, but what's going to happen out of the wheat supply. Because it was from that dam, they were able, and we get a large percentage of grain from the Ukraine. And so now there's going to be shortages of grain. So all of these things are planned. It's all part of a plan. And it's a lie. And it's crisis after crisis after crisis, lie after lie. If you keep telling it long enough, people will believe it. The imaginations, now the image. Now we're all on the same page. The earth is being destroyed, and we got 5 years unless we do something about it. Now, I got a solution here. Mark, number, or name. Let's all get involved in this. But then there's going to be some truth believers that said this is all a lie. We have the media during the lockdowns, and millions were. Now, this is called cognitive dissonance. This is what this is called here. It's cognitive dissonance. The media during the lockdowns of millions were quarantined called those who resisted the locking down super spreaders, while the BLM protesters are praised as peaceful protesters. It's unbelievable. So here they are, and here's the idiocy. All right, let's sit in circles. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. Believe it. Say it. Stupid, isn't it? It is, but believe it. There you go. Now you love everybody. But then you have the BLM people, the riots in the streets, and everyone's breathing and chucking rocks on each other. The climate agenda, the climate cult. So here we are. What are we to do? Do not conform. Be like this guy. Be conformed to Christ. Do this when they spout their nonsense. I don't believe it. It's a lie. Romans 8:29, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate, be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. I'm almost done here, I think. Yeah, I got 2 slides left, so we'll finish up. Now remember, here it is. Remember, the image precedes the number. Now this is a possible example of how to enforce the penalty and can't buy or sell unless they accept one of the 3 options under the image of the beast. So this would be the ESG, if that's what it be. So you have three options to buy or sell. And it won't all be because you have to have a chip in your hand. There's other options here. So the mark or the name or the number of his name. So he says here, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in the right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark. All right, so you have a mark. He that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. Now, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. When you look at the papacy of Rome, and I don't know what you call that hat he has on, that dunce hat that he wears. But and even Irenaeus, when he talked about the name and so forth, using the Greek numerical 666. But the papacy of Rome and everything you're going to see as the first beast was, as he's the Antichrist, and he received a wound, but he was that 666. And I think it was, you had John Crandall. See, in As with Roses, we had Clark, Holmes, and what was the third one? Was it Crandall? Crandall. All right, now he suffered at the hands of the court. And during his trial, he said that this is the badge of the whore. So this is the mark of the beast, as in the first beast. And then we have the mark of the beast in the second, like unto the first. So what you see, the first beast, you can see in the second. This one comes up out of the sea. This one comes out of the earth. And there is the rhyming between them. Roger Williams could not buy or sell because he did not have the image. He would not submit in compliance. So what did they do? They banished him. He could not buy, he could not sell. And they banished him, and the Indians took him in. And they fed him, and they took care of him. So you understand, the same thing that happened then is the same thing happening now. Different place, different time, same motive, same crime. And that's what we have to understand concerning this. So our forefathers went through this, but that first beast received a wound. Well, then there's going to come another one, but it's going to come up out of the earth. But it's going to be the same system. Y'all understand that? The same system. The image is the culture of thought which is over the system of the mark, name, or number. It's getting everyone on board. We're white supremacists. America's a bad country. Let's tear down the statues, tear down the flag, start over, and so it's believing a lie, and so that's the purpose. We're trying to get us to believe a lie. That's why I think this week what we've dealt with is all dealing with the subject of truth. So here's wisdom. So let's stay with the truth. Now, his time is short. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. By the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto death, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and to the sea, for the devil has come down unto you having great wrath. Now, the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. Now, the first beast came out of the sea. The second beast comes out of the earth. And so he has a short time. And having great wrath, because he knoweth he hath but a short time. The truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. You cannot suppress truth. You suppress it here, it springs up over here. You cannot suppress it. All right? So we focus on the truth. And anytime you believe a lie, you accentuate perversion. It stimulates our lust. That's why we walk in truth. All right, we walk in truth. So that's another message that I've spoken in the past, but for all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the eye, and the pride of life, and the works of the flesh are these: adulteries, fornications, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, and heresies, and etc. These are the works of the flesh. And how do these works of the flesh happen? It comes out of this, that when Jesus said, "Ye are of your father the devil, the lust of your father ye will do," because he was a liar. Why will you do the lust of your father? Because of a lie. Pride is a lie. A lot of people fall into immorality because of their pride. Preachers, we've seen that in the 70s and 80s and 90s, falling like trees in a storm, I tell you. because of pride. I think I'm somebody. That's a lie. You're a sinner saved by grace. You're no better than anybody else. It's a lie. See, when you believe a lie, you're full of pride. So that's what happens. It's a lie. So be careful on what you listen to and what you believe. It's a lie. So that's where we're heading into now, this mark of the beast. And I think what we're seeing it rising. And that's why the Revelation is not a futurist view. Well, you want to keep believing the futurist view, okay, keep believing the lies and see where you go. But the Revelation is a book of prophecy, but it's also based on the historic view as the church lived through it. All prophecy has been lived through, such as with when Jeremiah, Ezekiel talked about concerning Israel and what was to come after the 7 years of captivity. And then there'll be 3 waves going back to Jerusalem, and the third wave starts the prophetical clock when they rebuild the walls in the city. See, that was prophesied, and they lived through it, and then it becomes history. Same thing with the Revelation. That's why when you look at the seals are pretty much dealing with what was happening in the Revelation with the elimination of where the sun went dark, not give her light. That's referring to the light of Israel and the elders of Israel. And the stars fell from heaven. That's referring to the elders of Israel. The light went out. And you'll see they overlap with the New Testament, but this ends. And then you see the persecution of the church and the riders on the horses. And then that's a lot of that's in the apostolic era. And then we come into the trumpets now. These are the proclamations of what's coming. Chapter 11 is an overview of what we just mentioned. And then with the 7th trumpet at the bottom of it, where Christ returns and the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our God. So you have the trumpets of declaration, and then you have the vials. That's the implementation of what's coming, the plagues and all that'll come. And so we are in this. And honestly, in my personal opinion, as I understand it, we are in the woes, and we are in. We're waiting now for the 7th trumpet to sound, and of course we're seeing a lot of this happening. And but anyway, I don't want to get into a Revelation study right now, but that's what I see, and it's how I understand it. Now, that's my personal understanding of it. Whether it's worth anything or not, you decide. But anyway, this is don't believe the lie. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay, Brother Henson?
You said stars fell from heaven, and you said that was the elders of Israel. Did I understand that right?
Okay, we have the sun going dark. That is the light of Israel as the temple. And who they are, the stars of heaven. That refers to the elders of Israel that fell. And then we have the moon turned to blood. The regulatory feasts were regulated by the moon. And so it went dark. And so what we're seeing is the elimination of the Old Testament economy completely.
Okay, you're referring to Acts 2, not Revelation 12.
Well, Acts 2 and then Joel chapter 2, yes. And also Revelation 6. I'm referring to it there when you see in Revelation 6 because it's almost the same thing as in Acts chapter 2. But Revelation 12, now here's something that people can't get their mind around when I'm talking to them. They'll say in Revelation 12, when we say the woman in the wilderness, the church, we're saying that Israel's the church. And so this is what people have a hard time with. When it talks about this woman, the sun and the moon and the 12 stars and so forth. Now, who brought forth Jesus Christ was Mary. It wasn't Israel, all right? Mary gave birth to Jesus, right? We know that. What we're looking at, though, this woman that brought forth a man-child, we're looking at the faith of Abraham and the promise. There were 7 covenants God made. He made the covenant with Abraham as a royal people, David a royal throne. We have the covenant he made with Phineas, an everlasting priesthood. And so he made 7 covenants in the Scripture. Now, when we look at concerning Israel, those who died in faith, those who kept the purpose of the Old Testament economy alive, as in an antitype, a type demonstrating Christ, they kept it alive, they believed. These all died in faith. As an example, in Hebrews 12, when it said they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute and afflicted, they were sawn asunder. There, Paul is referring to those who suffered in the days of Antiochus when he desecrated the temple. And that was a 3.5-year period that he did that. And history tells us that Antiochus was more diabolical than Hitler himself in what he did. And so these people died in faith. And then you have the restitution of temple worship and sacrifice and the cleansing of the temple. And these people kept this going. And of course, the seed through the tribe of Judah kept this going. And so these are the believers, if we would call them the remnant within the nation of Israel that kept this coming. And then here we come to the birth of Christ, and then we have those who are still waiting and believing as Simeon in the temple. Oh, I've seen the Lord, and so we see that there. And so then when Christ was here and he established the church, you had those that believed, that would die in faith, but believe now they're alive and Christ is here. These Old Testament Jews went from the Old Testament economy through the river, the water, Jordan River, baptized into the kingdom, the New Testament economy. And these people here are the same people now in a New Testament church. Am I right?
Amen.
All right, you understand that. These people now, the New Testament church was comprised mostly of Jews. Even up into Acts chapter 11, they preached none but to the Jews only. 10 years after the resurrection, that's Jews only. It was a Jewish church. It was Jewish, period. And then with Cornelius and then the Gentiles coming into this, they were grafted in. And when you read Kiffin's book, his writings, The Glorious Church, he was one of the signers of the 1648 Confession of Faith there in England. And he's one of my favorite authors, but he writes about the glorious church. And he also mentions about the baptizing is the process of the engrafting. That's what engrafted them into the olive tree, was the baptism of John. And but what we see is in chapter 12, when the woman would be this church, which was Jewish in nature, not Old Testament economy Jewish, but saved, born-again Jew, as well as now at the beginning of Gentiles being grafted in. This woman fled. So the very woman that brought Jesus in the symbolism into the world is the same woman that was baptized by John and was the collective assembly creating the church, sitting at the table, to whom the table was committed. They fled to the wilderness. The Waldenses, the Albigenses, although Jewish presence diminished over time and expanded into Gentile presence. But in the end, we'll see, as one of the signs, the Jews now, as a remnant only, which was only 14 million Jews, we believe, but only a remnant of them will accept the fact that Jesus was indeed the Messiah. So you will see that. And I think we're seeing that now. To answer your question,
Yes, sir. Almost a side note. A lot of what you're saying, the Old Testament, the same Jews, baptized by John. So many times people go to Matthew 3 and say these people came to John and got saved. Was it possible that many of those were already saved and understood this was the prophetic fulfillment of the man from the Old Testament prophecy of the forerunner, and they came to him knowing that?
Well, Jesus, they knew when Jesus was going to arrive based on Daniel's 70 weeks. When you look, I think it's 456 BC, and you use the lunar calendar, which would be the calculation summary you'd use, and you do the multiplying. See, the Jewish calendar was 360 days, not 365. And then you have, of course, the recalculation of that. But if you're, I have it, the formula, and I had it part of my notes, but that brings you right up to 30 AD. And that's when John the Baptist was the voice in the wilderness. So they knew, based on the calculation, if somebody's in the wilderness preaching, we're going to go check them out. So those that knew went, and those that had the faith and they believed as that remnant, they then followed John, and then they followed Christ. And yes, they now went from Old Testament to New Testament economy. So if you were Peter, you were living in a time where you were Old Testament economy, and you went through this translation into the kingdom of his dear Son. You were in both economies, and you went into the second one. And where Paul says there in Romans 8, which is now ready to vanish away. And that is when the light of Israel goes out. The light of Israel going out in the that's the second half of the 70th week of Jacob's trouble, that the light would go out, that they would end. And they did. The temple destroyed, etc. And then it goes into the New Testament economy. And this woman now fled to the wilderness. This is where the church has been until we come to America, the United States of true liberty. But that was the horn of the lamb, and then it'll turn the horn of a dragon. And the horns always represent kingdoms. And so we had a Christian principled nation in part, but keep in mind what John is teaching us about it. In the beginning it wasn't there. But then the dragon is Roman association too, because the dragon is Rome. And we have the Catholic Church or Protestantism, and so it shifts over into this dragon. And I think too, the Achilles heel of our country is our freedom. And that's what's happening. Because our freedom is only for a religious and moral society. J.S. Mills said that no law would ever have to be changed. He's a founding father. He said no law would ever have to be changed except it be for the moral sediment of society. And when our moral sediment is changed by virtue of a lie, that's when we're in trouble. So this is what we have. So that's what we see there. So you had a question, Brother Tom?
In regards to John's baptism for the Jews, for the ones that received the baptism, that wasn't a difficulty because of the ritual cleaning of the temple, and they understood that. So
Right.
anyways, in regards to the ESG, the government is going to be keeping a score, right?
Right.
And depending on your ESG score is going to depend on whether you can buy or sell
Right.
in the future.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and with that, there's a lot we don't know. We're doing guesswork based on a precedent of the first beast. So we understand the second beast by the first. And so we're doing guesswork. But I do know a lie is part of the issue, the lie that is there. Another question.
Just a comment that even though this stuff might come about and we won't be able to buy or sell, there's always another kind of economy. And to have maybe a skill or some stuff laid back, tools or even food or
Right.
mine is coffee, so I'll be selling coffee.
Yeah, it's true. So they're
There's nothing to worry about, really. They kill us.
yeah. Well, he counted us worthy then, But we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. All right? That's how they did it. The Waldenses wandered in the wilderness. They were not part of that economy of Rome, and they were by themselves, and they farmed, what have you. But we don't know, but there is a similarity between the two beasts. And it's just we don't have the papacy as that center focus of that individual. So, but the seat of the Antichrist, that seat of power, and see, people are looking for an individual. The Antichrist is definitely the papacy of Rome, and the Antichrist comes out of the church, and that's what happened with Rome when it consolidated and created a state church, and that's the Antichrist. Without question, that is, without question to me, as I understand it, he is the Antichrist. But then we look at the mark of the beast, and the beast is this conglomeration of these corporate powers, if you will, that control the economy. But the similarities are there. So, any other questions?
When you just mentioned that about the seat of the papacy being the Antichrist, clarifying that as you taught us before, remember it's the seat of
Right.
authority, not the particular pope, whoever that's sitting in that seat at the time. It could be whoever is sitting there.
Well, good point.
The seat.
Right, good point. And here's how we explain it. When Paul said, "I appeal unto Caesar," who was in charge? Who was the emperor at that time? Nero. But it's called Caesar's seat. Caesar Augustus. When he said, "I appeal unto Caesar," he didn't say, "I appeal unto Nero." He said, "I appeal unto Caesar." And Caesar was basically, he is the one that established the Caesarship. So it's referring to his seat. Although there's different emperors, but it's called Caesar's seat. All right? And so that's how we can explain that a little bit. So thank you, Laura. Anything else? All right. Well, we've gone over a little bit, but...